India's decision to induct 114 Dassault Rafale fighter aircraft into the Indian Air Force is being widely viewed as a decisive move to stabilize the country's air power, at a time when squadron strength is falling dangerously close to critical levels. Over the past decade, the retirement of legacy platforms, especially the MiG-21 fleet, combined with delays in new inductions, has steadily reduced the IAF's combat readiness. In such a scenario, choosing a proven, already inducted aircraft with established logistics and operational familiarity is not only logical, but strategically prudent. Rafale is not an experimental platform for India. Before we move forward, please like, subscribe, and share Strategic Vanguard, and be up to date with the latest news and happenings from the world of defense and strategic affairs. Tune into our video channels in Rumble and YouTube. And if you want to hear the audio version, please tune into Strategic Vanguard Deep Dive in Spotify. With 36 aircraft already in service across 2 squadrons, the Indian Air Force has built a complete ecosystem around the aircraft, including trained pilots, maintenance crews, weapon integration, and operational doctrines. Infrastructure investments at air bases, simulator facilities, spare parts pipelines, and technical training programs are already in place. Expanding an existing fleet is always faster and more cost-effective than introducing an entirely new aircraft type, especially when time is a decisive factor in deterrence. Operational credibility also matters in strategic calculations, and Rafale carries that credibility. It is a combat-proven multi-role fighter that has demonstrated effectiveness in high-intensity operational environments globally. In India's own regional context, Rafale has played a visible role in deterrence signaling, including during recent high-alert operational deployments along sensitive borders. Such signaling is not merely symbolic, it shapes adversary risk calculations and reinforces confidence within one's own forces. From a war planning perspective, air forces prefer predictability over ambition. Aircraft that are already integrated into command and control networks, compatible with existing weapon systems, and supported by mature maintenance frameworks, reduce uncertainty during crises. In a two-front contingency scenario involving both Western and Northern adversaries, the Indian Air Force requires platforms that can be mobilized immediately, not prototypes that are still years away from frontline service. Therefore, when viewed purely from the lens of immediate military necessity, Rafale was not just a good choice. It was arguably the safest choice available to India. The aircraft meets current operational requirements, fits seamlessly into existing force structures, and offers technological advantages in areas such as beyond visual range combat, electronic warfare, and precision strike capabilities. All of these are critical in modern air warfare, where battles are increasingly decided long before aircraft visually detect each other. However, strategic decisions are rarely limited to immediate battlefield requirements. Nations that aspire for long-term military autonomy must consider not only what secures today's skies, but what shapes tomorrow's aerospace capabilities. This is where the discussion becomes more complex, and where India's simultaneous pursuit of indigenous fighter programs enters the picture. Parallel to Rafale induction, India is developing the twin-engine deck-based fighter, or TEDBF, primarily intended for aircraft carrier operations with the Indian Navy. This program is a natural evolution following operational experience with carrier-borne aircraft, and reflects India's ambition to field indigenous naval fighters capable of operating from future aircraft carriers. More importantly, this naval program also led to proposals for an Air Force variant called ORCA, which would adapt the same airframe and core technologies for land-based operations. What makes ORCA strategically significant is that it falls into the same weight and capability class as Rafale. It is not a light fighter like Tejas, nor is it a future stealth platform like AMCA. Instead, it is designed as a medium multi-role combat aircraft capable of air superiority missions, deep strike, maritime attack, and high-end electronic warfare. In essence, it would perform many of the same roles currently assigned to Rafale within the Indian Air Force. This overlap raises an important policy question. If India is already developing an indigenous aircraft in the same operational segment, should long-term procurement planning not integrate that platform into force structure decisions? Instead of committing to large-scale imports in that very category, could India have adopted a more balanced approach by limiting Rafale numbers to immediate requirements, while accelerating ORCA development for medium-term force replacement? One alternative strategy could have been to procure an additional 36 to 54 Rafales to stabilize squadron numbers while simultaneously guaranteeing large production orders for ORCA. Such guaranteed numbers are often the deciding factor in the survival and success of military aviation programs. Without firm commitments, even technically successful projects risk stagnation, budget cuts, or eventual cancellation due to shifting priorities. A major vulnerability of indigenous fighter programs globally is not engineering failure, but institutional hesitation. Aircraft development requires long timelines, sustained funding, industrial continuity, and confidence that production lines will remain active long enough to justify supplier investments. When future procurement remains uncertain, manufacturers cannot scale up production capacity, and technological learning curves flatten. By contrast, large-scale imports send a different economic signal. They reinforce foreign production lines, foreign research programs, and foreign export pipelines. Every additional aircraft purchased abroad strengthens another country's aerospace ecosystem. While India remains primarily an operator rather than a designer in that segment of fighter aviation, this does not diminish the value of Rafale as a platform. It remains among the most capable fourth-plus generation fighters in service today. But strategic autonomy is not measured by how advanced imported platforms are. It is measured by how much control a nation retains over upgrades, modifications, integration of indigenous weapons, and export decisions. Indigenous aircraft allow faster adaptation to emerging threats because design authorities remain domestic. Sensors can be upgraded, software modified, weapons integrated, and mission profiles adjusted without prolonged negotiations with foreign manufacturers or governments. In future conflicts where technological cycles are shrinking, such agility becomes strategically invaluable. ORCA, if pursued seriously alongside TEDBF, could also have served as a technological bridge toward more advanced platforms like AMK. Systems integration experience, flight control software, avionics architectures, and propulsion integration challenges all build cumulative institutional knowledge. Skipping or delaying such platforms slows learning curves across the entire aerospace sector. There is also the question of economies of scale. Naval fighters alone may not generate sufficient numbers to justify large production lines or attract robust private sector participation. However, if both Navy and Air Force variants share common components, training systems, and supply chains, production volumes increase significantly, driving down per-unit costs and improving sustainability. From an industrial policy standpoint, this synergy is crucial. Aerospace manufacturing thrives on repetition, iteration, and supply chain maturity. Every additional aircraft produced strengthens tooling efficiency, supplier reliability, and workforce expertise. This cumulative effect is difficult to replicate when procurement remains fragmented across multiple foreign platforms. Critically, indigenous fighter programs also create export possibilities. Countries seeking alternatives to expensive Western platforms or politically sensitive suppliers may consider reliable mid-range fighters from emerging aerospace powers. However, export credibility requires domestic induction first. No international customer buys aircraft that the producing nation itself is reluctant to field in large numbers. Strategically, this is where opportunity costs matter. While Rafale provides immediate operational relief, large-scale dependence on imports in the medium fighter category risks slowing India's transition from buyer to builder in advanced combat aviation. Long-term sovereignty in defense does not emerge from sporadic indigenous projects, but from consistent integration of domestic platforms into core force structures. None of this suggests that India should abandon imports entirely. Even major aerospace powers maintain foreign procurement channels for specific technologies or niche capabilities. However, strategic balance requires that imports do not systematically displace indigenous development in overlapping operational roles. The challenge, therefore, is not Rafale itself, but scale and sequencing. If Rafale numbers expand too far into future force structures, ORCA risks being perceived as redundant, regardless of technical merit. That perception can become self-fulfilling, leading to reduced funding, delayed timelines, and eventual marginalization of the program. At the same time, one must acknowledge institutional realities. Defense procurement decisions operate within political, financial, and diplomatic constraints. International partnerships carry strategic value beyond military hardware, influencing diplomacy, trade, and geopolitical alignments. France remains a reliable defense partner for India, and strengthening that relationship has broader strategic benefits. Yet, strategic partnerships and strategic autonomy are not mutually exclusive goals. Countries that successfully balance both integrate foreign acquisitions into transitional phases while ensuring indigenous platforms dominate long-term force structures. This approach requires disciplined procurement planning and long-term political commitment that outlives individual defense budgets. India's aerospace ambition is not merely about producing aircraft. It is about mastering the entire ecosystem of propulsion, avionics, materials science, systems integration, and software-driven warfare. Each new indigenous fighter program pushes that frontier forward, but only if it moves beyond prototypes into mass production and sustained service. The danger is not technological failure, but institutional indecision. Programs stall when future procurement remains ambiguous. Industry hesitates to invest. Talent migrates to other sectors. Momentum fades. Eventually, what began as an ambitious national project becomes another footnote in procurement history. Rafale secures India's skies today, and in the present strategic environment, that security is non-negotiable. But future conflicts will be shaped not only by aircraft numbers, but by who controls the technology cycles, upgrade paths, and production capacity behind those aircraft. ORCA and TEDBF represent more than just additional fighters. They represent stepping stones toward aerospace maturity, where India transitions from selective manufacturing to comprehensive design leadership. That transition cannot happen if core combat roles remain permanently assigned to imported platforms. Ultimately, the question is not whether Rafale was the right aircraft. It clearly was. The deeper question is whether India structured its procurement strategy in a way that maximizes both immediate readiness and long-term sovereignty. History shows that countries that fail to nurture indigenous defense industries during periods of operational stability find themselves strategically dependent during future crises. Strategic foresight is measured not only by what protects national security today, but by what sustains it decades from now. Aircraft carriers, submarines, fighter jets, and missile systems all have service lives spanning multiple generations of political leadership. Decisions taken today will shape India's military posture well into the middle of this century. In that sense, the Rafale decision solves a critical problem, but ORCA represents a strategic opportunity that should not be allowed to fade into developmental limbo. The true measure of success will be whether India can integrate both immediate force readiness and long-term industrial self-reliance into a coherent air power doctrine. India does not need to choose between Rafale and ORCA. What it needs is a procurement architecture where imported platforms stabilize present capability while indigenous platforms dominate future force structures. Achieving that balance requires policy discipline, industrial confidence, and sustained political commitment. If Rafale represents certainty, ORCA represents sovereignty. A mature air power must ultimately possess both, and the real strategic challenge before India is not whether it bought the right fighter, but whether it will invest deeply enough in building the next one.
Thank you for joining us on this Strategic Vanguard Deep Dive. If you found value in this analysis, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. We bring you fresh deep dives every Wednesday and Saturday here on YouTube and Rumble, and you can also catch the audio versions on Spotify and Amazon Music. Just search for Strategic Vanguard Deep Dive. For more insights, articles, and discussions, subscribe to our blog at strategicvanguard.com. Your support helps us grow and bring you more in-depth analysis on defense, geopolitics, and strategy. Until next time, stay informed, stay strategic.